By the time I'm recording this, the Overwatch update releasing the 5 new heroes, an overall pretty big update in Overwatch 2's history, hasn't released yet, but I think this update might actually bring people back, considering the fact they're doing quite a bit, like removing the 2, which should help with the marketing. The new heroes, the subclasses, a lot of stuff, what I think if you're actually a returning player or even like a consistent player of Overwatch 2, I think you might actually enjoy this update. However, that's not what I wanted to talk about, at least in this section. What I wanted to talk about is how this update at the very least needs to be great. Why? Because this will most likely be the turning point on how Overwatch is viewed now until the future. I don't need to describe how a complete mess Overwatch 2 was. The format changed, PvE mess, and overall just a failure to deliver on what was promised, and it led people away, and it was kind of viewed as like the failed sequel that was talked about endlessly on how you should not run a sequel in your game, and overall how it was not even needed. I know some things weren't even like 100% Blizzard's fault, as they were going through like a whole different like business change with like Activision and then Microsoft. So it was pretty messy, and just like how they were kind of just under kind of new management, and you know, different ideas were getting spread. It was just a mess. That's the point. The whole like problem with Overwatch 2 was it didn't really have a clear vision, and if they did, the vision didn't really get to be explored because there was just so much external factors not allowing it to succeed as a sequel, which are just some of the like the many reasons why people just completely just gave up on this game to begin with. For the record, I've played Overwatch since the first Christmas event, which was like in 2016, which was the first year of the game's released. As of now, I occasionally tune in to see what's been happening with the game, because like a good portion of the player base, they have poured just so much time into the game. You might as well sometimes peek to see what's going on, but I don't regularly play the game anymore. Which leads me to the newest and most talked about hero shooter as of late, Marvel Rivals. Now, depending if you're a Marvel Rivals player, an Overwatch player, or even if you like to play both from time to time, that's completely fine. This is not going to be talking about which is better. Quite frankly, it does not really matter which one you view is better. I feel like that's a different topic for a different video, or even just like a different discussion. But, you know, I think it's very important to just know that at the end of the day, you should want both games to want to succeed, because depending on which time you actually got into hero shooters, they have changed the genre for better, for worse, and like has showed many different players what's actually good and what's not good for a longevity of a game, or even what's healthy for a game. But I feel like both games have definitely had their time to shine. Now I currently think it's Marvel Rivals' time to shine. As you know, Overwatch came way before it, but I just think that it's kind of silly to just bash one person for liking one or the other. What I do say is open criticism about the game is, you know, needed, because that's how games improve. But I will say I feel like each have their own uniqueness to them. I feel like while they're definitely similar because they're hero shooters, I feel like they can both give something new to whichever type of, you know, player wants to try each game. You know, if you like your Marvel characters, you can play Marvel Rivals. If you want like a more first-person shooter style game, then you can play Overwatch. The point I'm trying to say is it doesn't really matter which game you prefer, as long as you're willing to see the other side and quite literally just be aware of what both games have to offer. Now, enough of me rambling. I just wanted to say that this game practically took what was great about Overwatch and amplified it with new features like the hero bans, the team ups, the free heroes on launch, and overall, for the most part, it was a pretty fun experience. I'm not going to discuss every single little thing about Rivals, but I just wanted to say that the NetEase devs clearly see the Overwatch update and are obviously planning something, because let's say the Overwatch update is good, it'll obviously force Marvel Rivals, like Overwatch is doing right now, to improve the game for the better, which is honestly a win for both enjoyers of the game. Because if you didn't know, there was really no other hero shooter besides Overwatch that was on top, and quite literally, there was no other game, at least regarding that genre, that forced Overwatch to kind of think about its gameplay and just its overall game and consider the fact, hey, maybe if we don't add these features, another game will take over. That is exactly what Marvel Rivals did. Especially since when Rivals actually launched, and even before launch, people were pretty speculative about the game. They didn't really think it was actually going to succeed. They thought it was going to be another Paladin situation. People were making fun of like the art style, and overall didn't have much faith in the game. But when it actually released, it was like actually just a breath of fresh air, and people gravitated towards the fact it was Marvel, and quite literally it was a pretty fun game. When it launched, a lot of people were playing it because it was overall fun and just capitalized on what Overwatch did correctly and just used that to amplify their game. Now, with the new Overwatch talent season and all these heroes, I feel like the more important aspect is obviously the player base that is continuously and just a consistent part of Overwatch wants it to be good so they can actually, you know, enjoy their game and quite literally just have their game be able to compete with other games and not necessarily be looked at as a joke, and can be actually considered as, you know, a game worth checking out again. Now let's look at the other side of the spectrum. If this update is not good, I feel like, now this is not 100% true because maybe the NetEase developers won't actually fall into this trap, but hopefully it does not end up like a reverse Overwatch situation where, you know, if this update flops and just to say Overwatch has no way of returning to the top, which I don't think will happen. I do think this update might be promising, and at the very least it might spark some interest again, at least, you know, for a little bit, which is obviously the most important thing. I don't want it to be where Rivals remains on the top with little to no competition. And that's kind of the important part. The competition aspect of gaming is what even allows games to become remotely better for their player base, and just will encourage more people to try out their game. Because if you have competition, now let's say, obviously it doesn't have to be neck and neck, but if there's a chance another game might take over and improve on what your game couldn't, you obviously are going to try and make your game the best it can possibly be, you know, considering the fact that this is the game you want to output. You're going to improve on these aspects, you're going to listen to your community, and this is what you want for your game, so everyone playing this game can quite literally be able to say, yes, this game, our game, my game, whichever, is like the most fun I've had in video games in like a really long time. But I honestly think Overwatch needs this the most because it is not being consistent whenever something new happens. You know, each time, at least in the past, considering this is the Overwatch 2 we're talking about, each update they have output hasn't really retained any of like the players. They haven't really sparked much interest. There's been a few times, like I will say season 9, where they added a new system. It did spark a little bit of interest, but onward, nothing has really, at least from what I remember, consistently kept the players, you know, happy, or even brought back the players who left to begin with. I mean, they added more characters, but some of the characters didn't really land with people. The systems were kind of not really that impressive. The one time I can actually remember when the game actually was being talked about again was, you know, when Wu Yang released, and he was pretty cool. He was a really cool character. But I will say, after Wu Yang, the characters have been, and at least the systems have been, pretty interesting. And I just hope that it can actually continue. I do think Overwatch needs us the most because I feel like this game really falls into the trap of we're so back for like a week, then back to not being mentioned because the core gameplay is not as fun as it used to be. I do think it looks promising considering the fact that it has people talking about it again, which is good. But if it can really hold that retention, at least for an entire season, more or less, or even at least just half the season, I think there's a good possibility that the game can finally be in a situation where it can show itself and have a chance to shine and show what made it special in the first place. Last thing I want to say about Rivals is the update being good will allow Rivals to grow for the better. I mean, Rivals need some serious improving. Like, I think the main aspects of Rivals that need the most improvement are just the balancing and overall just like the matchmaking. But for whatever reason, if this Overwatch, last thing I want to say about Rivals is if the update is actually good, and last thing I want to say is that the update being good will actually allow Rivals to grow for the better. I mean, Rivals needs some serious improving in some aspects. I mean, I don't think NetEase is going to allow this to drag out any further, because even if, let's say, the Overwatch update bombs, people will turn away to other games. I mean, Deadlock is coming out, so, you know, there is competition in other aspects, but I think since these two are comparable, I think it's better to talk about these two. But I think Rivals, just the main improvements are just the balancing and just like the matchmaking. But for whatever reason, if this Overwatch update bombs, the people at NetEase will hopefully realize that you can't really make the same mistake Overwatch did, so you don't end up in a similar spot. I mean, the game is in its second year, so they definitely have time, but it's better to fix your issues now than have to do a complete 360 like Overwatch is doing right now in order to get just some like retention back, even though a majority was lost. But I do hope this update is good. I mean, we can actually find a way to bring some people back into the game, or at least try to update. I mean, I'm probably going to try to update. I'm going to make some videos on it. But I just really hope that this update can just show the general audience, and maybe even people who left Overwatch to begin with, that there is a chance that this game might be worth picking up again.